everyone, it's Mithrilda and welcome back to my journey of learning to draw. So we are coming up at the end of block 1 and I am so excited about how much progress I've made. Today we're going to be talking a bit more with Kevin about what to do after Evolve and how Evolve and observational drawing in general can translate into my ultimate goals of wanting to draw from imagination. And after our conversation, I'll give you some thoughts on what I thought of the last 2 paintings that I did here in this video and what I'm planning on doing next. I feel like I've asked you this like 10 different times, but like where do you go after Evolve? I'm still like, I'm like barely into it, but
it depends what you want, right? It depends what you want. So we got a guy that graduated from the school here in New Jersey 2 years ago, and he's going to the Noman School in California for animation. His stuff is incredible, and I ask him all the time, how is the education that he got from me holding up in that space? And one of the things he said to me, when he first got in there, maybe about 6 months in, and Noman, if you're not familiar with it, is arguably one of the top animation schools in the world. They have almost 100% placement rate. I mean, they're like incredible. And so what he said to me was that he really kind of took for granted all of the things he understood about picture making. And when he got there, everybody else was struggling with those fundamentals. They couldn't make sense of them. So they were fighting to figure that out while they were trying to also learn how the programs work. And it became an overwhelming workload for a lot of guys, where all he had to do was commit his energy to learning the programs, ZBrush and whatever else they were working with. And so the education applies. It applies to everything.
I feel like when I first started trying to learn to draw, my first instinct was to go to the subjects that I wanted to draw and look at resources for how to draw those particular things. Like I would sit there with, my book with like diagrams in it, and I would just try to copy those diagrams, and it would come out like really badly. And I really resonate with your example of your student at the animation school, because now I feel like I'm realizing that I was trying to learn to draw and trying to learn to draw something at the same time, whereas like learning to be able to see and to copy properly is necessary in order, if I even want to copy like a proper diagram out of a book. I feel like that's what I've been saying to people, right? Because people ask me, I thought you wanted to draw figures from imagination. Like, how is Evolve even going to help you with that? And I guess that's sort of been like my thought process, is the fact that if I can't copy these diagrams out of books properly, if I can't observe people properly, how can I possibly like translate that into, I guess like the magical figure in your mind that you draw from later on?
I can actually address that very well. Now that kind of frames the question for me better. So I'm going to take it in a little bit of a different direction, but it'll make sense. I like abstract art, okay, but good abstract art. And there's a difference between good abstract art and the vast majority of garbage that passes as abstract art. Most abstract art is just somebody throwing paint to the canvas and hoping something comes of it. But good abstract art, the artist understands the components and is able to manipulate them consistently for quality results. Not every painting will resonate with you, but you can see the intent in the work, right? You understand the color combinations, they use edges, they use value adjustments to create an impression in the space. And so, like if you look at these guys, you'll see them over and over, one piece after another, even if they're drastically different. You see the same tools at play. Shows you that they're educated. Those artists have an idea in their head, and they actually have the tools to take what they imagine and bring it to life. Someone who doesn't know how the components work, when they imagine in their head a particular red moving in a certain shape, how do they mix that red? How did they know how to mix that red if they don't understand color theory? That red isn't that red, it's that red only in relation to the things around it. Everything is relative. So if you have a canvas that's a soft pink and you put red on it, the red that you are expecting, it's going to be diminished because it's surrounded by other versions of red. But however, if you put it on something that's mildly green, that red's really going to be powerful, right? Because it's a relationship, complementary colors, right? If the red is warm and the green is cool, that's a very different, that gives you even more pop, right? So, but it's about the intent. As an artist who wants to be able to paint from your imagination, if you can see something in your mind, you can only see it based on what you understand, right? So if you understand how shadows and lights work, you can see in your head the thing you wanted to bring to life based on that system that you already have. You understand shadows are going to fall one way, light's going to be another. So your imagination is informed by your education. When you see something in your imagination, if you don't understand what graded edges do and what sharp edges do, how are those edges going to be properly placed in your imagination for that thing? If you don't understand how temperature works and how color works, right? All of these things. So you can have an idea in your head, but without an education in the real world, copying real things, right? Because you got a table, you put an apple on a table, and if you can paint the apple flawlessly, why can't you paint something you see in here flawlessly? As long as you can see it. But if you can only paint the apple at 40% of what you're actually seeing, how much of what you have in your head are you going to be able to get out onto canvas with such remedial skills? Right? And that's really what it comes down to. The better your skill, the greater your understanding, the more you can look inside and get that out in a way that's intended. Right? Does that make sense?
So are you saying that as I learn more and I gather more knowledge, like I'll be able to see things like more clearly in my head?
Yeah.
Because right now it feels like a vague idea and it looks a lot better than what I can put like down on the paper. Will it always be like that if I can like see things better? But how does that translate into like actually putting it down?
So let me give you an idea. Do you know the anatomy of a hand? Like, have you ever studied anatomy of a hand?
Not really.
No. So I want you to think, don't look down at your hands. I want you to think about what a hand looks like. A male hand, a strong male hand. Veins, muscle, right? Get a good image? Enough? Okay. Now imagine if you took a course on anatomy of that hand. Bones, muscle, sinew, skin, what it all looked like, how it built up. And at the end of that class, I then asked you to imagine that same hand. Do you think that you would have a much stronger view in your head of what that hand looks like? Now that you are informed, could you not visualize even where the veins go? Because the veins are specific, they're particular, they run down certain parts of the arm, left and right or center, and those ones they cross over, they go down different fingers. If you knew where they went, you'd be able to imagine them when you think about it. And all that is that you're now informed. Why would it be any different with light and shadow, or edges, or color? Right? So the more informed you are, the more educated you are, the stronger your imagination becomes, and the closer you can get your imagination to the end result of the piece of art you want to create. Because your imagination is informed. So yeah, I mean, even with this stuff, you'd be surprised what you could do. I've done demos at the school where without any reference, I use like a 1-inch brush and I paint in the shape of a shadow and it's a face. And that'll block in the light. And all I do is I get a shadow like this, and then I get the light, and then I put the gradients where the gradients go. Very quick. I'm just smushing the things together to create the gradients, just so that the gradients, you get an impression of what is formed relative to the sharp edges, right? So they're not elegant or anything. And then, once it's done, I'll then change the face from like a angular male face to a kind of round girl face. And take 20 years off, turn it from a guy to a girl, just by moving a few things around. And we're not talking about crazy like this. We're talking about a very simple structural head. But if you can get the structure of the head and you know what an eye looks like, you could paint the eye into the socket where it goes, right? I mean, if you know the anatomy of an eye, why wouldn't you be able to place it? The eye is not that complex. People think it is, but it's really not. And the nose, like if you can get the overall shape of the nose, how hard is it to place the nostrils? Again, if you are informed. But all you have to know is a little bit of anatomy and understand how shadow, light, and gradients work. So, gradients and sharp edges to create that form. You could manipulate it over and over and over. Turn it into an old lady, turn it into an old man, turn it into a baby, back and forth and back and forth. Just keep moving the paint around. Right? A baby's face is kind of short and round, right? Their features are kind of smaller in their face. Everything's kind of puckered up, right? But as long as you know what a baby's face looks like, not in specifics, but in general form, you could change the shape to look like a baby. You could even have 5 images of faces, put the canvas down, get your shadows and lights for the first one, and then move to the second one and make the changes. And then move to the third one and make the changes. And again, not in details, but just in bulk shapes. Once you have the bulk shapes in place, how hard is it, do you think, if you have an idea of what it goes inside of the bulk shapes, right? So like again, going back to the hand, if you looked at my hand, right? Let's just do it this way. If I gave you this outline and you were informed about how the hand works, you could figure out where the knuckles go, where the tendons are, even where some of the veins go, where the knuckles are, right? You could figure these things out if you knew a bit of human anatomy, if I gave you the outline. So what you do is in your imagination, you start with that outline, with that basic blob of clay. Get that in place. And that could literally be a stroke of paint, a stroke of paint, a stroke of paint, a stroke of paint, cut across, this comes down, right? And you just kind of fill this in and then you kind of drop the thumb in. The overall shape, that looks good to me. Now I'm going to start breaking it up. So now it's like here, 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 and here. Those are the knuckles. And then everything up there is lit, everything down here is in shadow, and then we have the next row of knuckles, right? And so, but you can build it once you have the bulk shape. You can then build it. And so your imagination doesn't have to be the whole hand. It has to be the shape and proportions of the hand. That's the starting point. Once you have that, finger by finger, you can just work through, well, what's in the finger? But that's how you paint from your imagination, if you're looking for realism. And if you're looking for something more abstract, you have a lot more latitude to be creative. But you want to do it from a place of information, not luck, but to have an intent before the marks go down.
How do you make sure that you learn things? I can imagine there's certain methods of art making that will inform this knowledge better than others. I don't know if this is true or not, but I would imagine that if you stick to a grid sort of method of copying something, then you would not be able to learn as much about something if you're only focusing on the lines and copying them exactly, as opposed to looking at the overall hand, right? You can copy maybe the angles of a finger over and over again, but that wouldn't teach you what a hand looks like.
Right. And so part of it is the more that you make art, right? So in Evolve, right now you're working from traced images, but that's not the case in block 2 or 3 or 5, 6, 7, or 8. You're painting from direct observation. Starting in block 2, we teach you how to draw. And learning how to draw is not, it creates new neural pathways in your brain. Those neural pathways are not about drawing. They are about seeing. Learning to see. You're already learning, but that's going to really kind of ramp it up. And so learning to do proportional drawing teaches you to be observant. Once you start being observant in one place, it spills over into your life. So if you're painting people, you'll start noticing people. You'll start noticing the proportions. After a while, it becomes hard to even turn it off. Everything you look at, you're like, oh, stop. I can see that your eyes are a little bit higher than they should be based on the average, right? And it's kind of driving me crazy. I've seen people where they're so typically in a head, the eyes are in the dead center. And I've seen people where their eyes were like at this height, and it's just like, I mean, it's like I can't get out of the room fast enough, right? But the thing is that once you start doing these things, the things that matter to you, you'll start, because you'll be playing with them. And let's say you're painting a face. You're struggling with, so let's say the nose. You can't get the nose to be three-dimensional. You think you're not going to be looking at noses everywhere you go? You're going to be noticing them. And at some point, it's going to click. What have you been missing? It will click just through the practice. You know, the education is a very small part of becoming great at anything, right? Because you know the I would argue that look, you know, I can get you to doing hyper realistic art in 350 hours, and in truth, that's the first 4 blocks, but the education actually ends like something like 150 hours before that. I mean, it's you learn the stuff, and then block 4 is just kind of experience. We're trying to get experience. So let me think. It's like 60. So let's say about 100, and let's say it's about 100 and 120 hours worth of education, which then allows you in block 4 to then produce those paintings. Again, they're not going to be perfect at the beginning, but they get progressively better, not from education, but from experience. You made one and you figured some things out. You weren't taught. You realized that your thinking on something was this, and it should have been over 1 degree. You're not going to make that mistake again, right? And experience is what's informing you now. The more experience you get, the better you're going to get. The more experience you get, the more you see your shortcomings. And if you're smart, you are looking every place you go where you would see those things and trying to figure out what they are, what's going on with them. Right? And so again, an easier way to think about the education and the experience, imagine snowboarding. I could teach you how to snowboard without ever putting you on a snowboard. I could teach you, I could educate you, explain to you how it works. Good luck with that, right? It's not until you strap on that board and go down a hill and earn the experience yourself that you start to make sense of it. Now, let's say you take a half-hour lesson, right? Because that's about what they do on a slope, half-hour lesson on a snowboard. They show you how to stop, they show you how to turn, and then you go off on your own. 3 weeks later, if you're doing it every day, you're going to be pretty damn good. And everything after that half-hour lesson that got you pretty damn good is experience. You figured it out along the way based on the information you were given, right? You learn how to cut those turns better as you do them more and more. And it's no different. Like your skill's going to develop, but your ability to perceive is going to get better and better. And the more you're able to perceive, the more you're going to look to perceive, right? If you don't see things, you kind of walk through the world viewing it passively, and then all of a sudden, like you start seeing, like you've been taught to see something now, and now you're like, so let's say as an example, how edges dissolve as they get further and further away. You never noticed that before, but now that you've been educated, you look at it and you're like, you see it everywhere. So anytime something's like 5 miles away, you're like, yeah, there it is. Right? It sounds funny, but we do that.
Yeah, I felt that once, I guess a couple of times. I was out driving, and then I looked out over the side of the road, like off to some mountains, and I was like, oh my God, look in the distance, you can see blue, like further away.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, so that's a very simple thing. But imagine like if that's like level 1 being able to see. Imagine what level 50 looks like, where you see that type of stuff in faces and in hands and in cars as they go by, and in the clouds and the temperature of the sun hitting it and what the shadow side of the clouds look like. Every place you look, you're seeing things like that. As you can see them, your brain is calculating them, filing them, making greater sense of them. So every time you sit down and work, you're bringing all of that additional data to bear. And eventually everything just kind of clicks. But it's experience that does it, not the education. You can't get anywhere without the education, but once you've been educated, and the education, like it's like a seed, it's like a seed for a redwood tree. It doesn't look like much. Like the stuff you're doing right now, what I've taught you doesn't look like a lot. But let me tell you what you could do with what you already have. If you spent a year painting every single day using nothing but what you have, 4 shades of gray, 2 edges, doing shadows, lights, gradients, reflections, highlights, you could be producing hyper-realistic grayscale paintings. Just with what you know already. The experience would get you there without one additional piece of education. With that kind of ability to expand based on experience, everything that you see once you can see something, your eyes are open to something new, and all of a sudden you start seeing it everywhere. And then something else new opens up, you can see that everywhere. And all of a sudden, everything that you see offers that kind of experience. Over time, that's what happens. So then when you sit down to work, you have a catalog of this data and information that you're now able to just kind of throw at your work. You know, and it's like, that's when you look at a photograph. Like for me, I'll work from a photograph and I'm like, nah, that's no good. That's not going to fly. The camera did a terrible job of capturing that. I know what to do with that. I have eyes. I know what that should look like. Right? And that's when you start departing from the photographs and being able to produce something much more lifelike than the photograph can even give you. Not as detailed necessarily, but more alive. And so, you know, even the photographs are not the end goal. They're a launch pad. They're a point of departure, eventually. Not yet, but eventually they'll be a point of departure. They will be something to reference in the painting you're making, not the goal of the painting, to look like the photo. But you won't be able to do that until you can see the world and you start to understand. When you look at a photograph, you go, that's a terrible photograph. I know it looks good, but it's a terrible photograph for a painting. That would never work. I'm going to have to change this and change this and change this to bring the painting to life. And so that's what you do. But you can't depart from the photographs until you've developed the ability to replicate the photographs. And that doesn't matter if you're working from photographs beyond that or you're working from your imagination. You've got to be able to replicate it, because that is proof positive that you can paint what you can see. And what's the difference between seeing something with your eye or seeing something with your mind's eye? And confidence is a huge part of it. You have to believe. Enough successes will make you confident. And that's the key. Like, you know, if you do 10, 12 paintings and they're absolutely incredible, your confidence is going to be unshakable. So you dip your toe in something a little outside your comfort zone, but you do it with some confidence. So that 1 foot squarely planted in the place where you're comfortable. You dip your toe out there and you realize, hey, that wasn't so bad. Expand your circle a little bit. Do it again. Expand your circle. Do that for 20 years. Think about where that would get you.
All right. Thanks so much to Kevin for taking the time to talk to me and answer my questions, especially the same questions over and over, and allow me to share them here. I hope that was interesting and useful. And if you have any thoughts, any experiences, please tell me. I'm always down to learn more from different perspectives. So these last 2 paintings, the bunnies and the cats, they have been the most frustrating paintings that I've done so far. And like, they're not the longest paintings I've ever done time-wise, but I'll just be staring at the reference and looking back at my painting and staring at the reference, and I feel like it just doesn't match, and I'm just like trying to paint a rabbit, or I'm trying to paint a cat, or whatever. And I'll feel so tempted to just, go and look up, what did other people do for this painting? Because I remember looking at the wall or looking at the website or people's posts on Instagram, and I'm just like, wow, like their cat painting is so good, their bunny painting is so good. I wonder if mine will be that good when I get there. And now I'm here and I'm just like, this looks terrible, I don't know what to do. but there was a little passage that they had in exercise 12 that specifically addressed this. It says, "As you progress through this program, you will see other students' work and different examples of paintings. However, it is critical that you do not develop a dependency on working from the videos or from other students' work. Your reference photo may differ slightly from the video or from other examples of final paintings. This is why it is crucial that you work from the reference and not copy the video or a photo that you come across. The goal is to create confident artists who are able to assess their references and make their decisions based on the provided photo, not other students' paintings or by following along with the videos. Do not draw or paint from the videos or make decisions based on student submissions. Adhere strictly to your reference photo." And so I had to dig this part up because I remembered this in my heart, and it took a lot of strength for me to not just look up like some student work that I know was absolutely gorgeous. And I don't know what happened. I just stopped thinking, like, I just stopped trying to paint a rabbit, and I stopped trying to paint a cat, and I just went back to the steps. Like, fill in the colors, is this darker or lighter? Fill in the shadows and the reflections. And then I just felt like it didn't look right. And then I walked away and I came back, and all of a sudden there it was. There was a rabbit or there was a cat, and I was just like, holy hell, like what happened? I don't know, like when I was trying to paint a rabbit or whatever, it just never looked right. But when I just copied the shapes and I followed the steps exactly as it was, just trying to paint the shapes of light and shadow, all of a sudden it came together. I don't even know how to describe it. Anyway, it was frustrating, but it worked out. So the last painting, which I've been procrastinating on a bit because it's just so intimidating, is this pumpkin. And I feel like if you told me 3 months ago when I started this course that I would be taking on an assignment that turns this into this, like, that's just insane. I still feel like it's slightly insane now, but after doing like 19 different assignments up to this point, I'm just like, you know what? I trust it. I feel like I can probably do it. I don't know, probably. So I guess I can't procrastinate anymore because after I finish this video, I won't have any more footage. So I gotta get started. And so aside from all that, Kevin has really been pushing us to start selling our work and pricing things and learning how to get things ready for stuff like that, which is like really freaking me out. And I've been looking up like, how do you mat a painting? How do you frame a painting? And it's all very confusing, and this whole concept is spooky because, I don't know, I'm kind of a hoarder and I love my artworks and I don't want them to leave me. But on the other hand, I think it would be really cool to make things that make other people's homes beautiful and happy. So I guess I'll have to figure that out. So be on the lookout for a video in the near future where I take one of those paintings that are just hung up on my wall with painter's tape with all the messy edges, and I'll put a mat on it and a frame on it and price it. Exercise 18 took 6 hours and 36 minutes, and exercise 19 took 7 hours and 7 minutes. So see you all next time when I'll be officially done with block 1 of Evolve Artist, and I can finally give you my full thoughts on this first part of the curriculum and get started with block 2, proportional drawing, and I'll finally be doing paintings from life and observation. Stay safe and healthy out there, and remember that talent is a myth. Now, get back to work.